folks. Welcome to the Creator's Journey with the Halfling and the Spaceman. We love talking to different creators about their creative journeys, and we are excited to have Marc Gunn with us. Marc Gunn is a Celtic folk musician, singer who grew up on sci fi and fantasy, but for some reason he was shunned by his Celtic community. We're going to get into that a little bit because I'm kind of curious how that works. But that kinda led him to decide to get a mixture of his love of sci-fi fantasy and Celtic music, and he's got his own brand of music that he calls Sci F'Irish. F'Irish.
Sci
Sci
F'Irish.
F'Irish.
Pronounce
Yes.
that for me, Mark.
Sci
I'm not
F'Irish.
Irish, I'm not Well,
Yeah.
we met Mark at Multiverse Convention, and we are glad to welcome him to our podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was great meeting y'all at Multiverse, and I'm excited to chat with y'all.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join us. So we're going to go ahead and get the ball rolling.
All right.
Tell us a little bit more about your background and how and when did you decide to do that blending of your love of sci-fi, fantasy and the Irish folk music. How did that come about? So tell us a little bit about yourself and how that happened.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't start off playing Irish music. I was a big Elvis Presley fan growing up, and somewhere along the way, back in college, I had some rock bands. Well, about mid '90s, one of my rock bands broke up, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself. I was not a great songwriter. I was not a great guitarist, and I got started playing music because I wanted to write music. And then one day I picked up the auto harp. My dad had auto harps when I was growing up. He played all sorts of folk instruments.
Mhm.
Took me to some folk sessions when I was a kid. I picked up the auto harp and I really loved the sound. And I just sat there for the next 6 months just going strum, strum, and it sounded really cool. And after a while, I decided that I wanted to figure out how to play the instrument. At the time, this is late '90s, so we didn't have much in the way of internet. I didn't know what an auto harp was supposed to sound like.
Mhm.
So I picked it up and I started. Well, I found a book of auto harp, how to play the auto harp. I started strumming, figure out some strum patterns. Next thing you know, I'm writing some songs.
Mhm.
One of the songs I had written was uh, had, I'll call it a Celtic song, and I say that because number one, the songwriting was really bad. Number two, the music was nice, but nothing special. But it was enough that and
Mhm.
another song that I had learned, the Irish Ballad by Tom Lehrer. Those two songs I was playing on the South Mall at the University of Texas at Austin when someone says, "Hey, you want to play at a Renaissance festival?" And I'm like, "Yes!" And before that, back in the '70s, I had gotten to Star Wars, Star Trek. I loved them both. Spent years, got into in the early '80s. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I moved to Texas, and because of all that, the idea of playing at Renaissance Festival was like, yes, this sounds like the best thing ever. And so I pulled up a friend, my friend Andrew McKee. We started a group called the Brobdingnagian Bards, and we started playing at Renaissance festivals. This is a fun story of how it grows because about 3 years later, we had started during that time we'd started playing Irish songs. That's where we started playing Irish music, 1999 at Excalibur Fantasy Fair. But as that we started playing, we started also did parodies. We started doing just funny songs. There was a song called "If I Had $1 Million" by the Bare Naked Ladies, and we turned it into "If I Had $1 Million Ducats." There's all these just fun songs that we had found along the way. And one day we got hired to play at a wedding, and this musician, this magician actually, who was getting married, and we were following him around the fair. They had just said their vows, and we were, playing music. My partner plays the recorder, and we're playing, and I'm playing music. And he says to us, he says, "I love that y'all play filk music." And we're like, "What? What's filk?" And he defines it. It's the music of fandom. And I was like, "Okay." Started to understand what this was. About a year after that, we were on mp3.com. Our music had started blowing up over there because of a track we had released called Tolkien, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Basically, we had found we loved Lord of the Rings, and we named this instrumental track we had written all about Lord of the Rings, inspired by that because it had that feel. We started playing this song. It blew up on mp3.com, and I'm posting our music on the Celtic charts because we were playing Celtic music, Irish songs and such. And this was the track that was really taking us to the next level.
Mhm.
But I saw a band on there, and the band was Emerald Rose, who I later learned was a Celtic rock band out of Atlanta, which at the time we were living in Austin. But this Celtic rock band is playing there, and I'm just stalking them on the website, seeing what they're doing, and I see that they're playing at a science fiction convention on Long Island in Stony Brook, New York, and I'm like, why is a Celtic band playing at a science fiction convention? So I'm like, will they want another one? So I call up this university and contact them. And turns out the woman who was booking was like, "Oh my God, you're with the Brobdingnagian Bards?" And she loved our music. She had found us on mp3.com
Oh,
and loved our
cool.
music. So we got hired to do our very first science fiction convention. But we were doing still Irish songs and some filk, these parodies.
Uh-huh.
And while we were out there, Emerald Rose invited us to come to Atlanta. Next thing you know, we're doing Dragon Con, and then other science fiction conventions start opening their doors to us. So, um, the time flies by. The band breaks up. I start getting the Celtic music. We had one song though that had taken off on mp3.com. It was we had found it actually on mp3.com, and we covered it. And it was the song called "The Jedi Drinking Song," and it was just a really funny song inspired by Star Wars and kind of science fiction as well, and Irish music as well. So we started playing that, and that was like one of the songs that really took us to another level at science fiction conventions. When the band breaks up and I start playing solo, and that's when I really started diving in. I recorded an album of Hobbit songs, most of the lyrics written by my friend Richard Rose, who we had known for years, an author, and started doing Celtic music. But as I started expanding at science fiction conventions, I found that one of the things I found at Renaissance festivals is that while people who loved us at Renaissance festivals, they loved our music, but it was the people, but they worked at the Renaissance festivals, they went to science fiction conventions to play. So they get dressed up and go to the cons and play, and then they get to hear our music. So I realized that science fiction conventions were kind of a better route for me. And it wasn't until I moved to Atlanta, and it was about 3 years ago. I was at 4 years ago, I think I was at the Lost Druid Brewery here in Atlanta, and the I went into this brewery and asked them, "Hey, will you bring a can I come play here?" And she brings her husband out, and he says, "This is the guy that plays Sci F'Irish music." And I'm like, here I am 20 years later playing Sci F'Irish music, and I didn't even know what to call it. And he ultimately named it for me. So that's the the long drawn out story of
You didn't even come up with the name. Somebody else
no,
picked
yeah.
it. Ah,
I
that's
did
cool.
start doing sci-fi drinking songs at conventions, and I have a CD. I actually have a line of CDs of Firefly drinking songs, sci-fi drinking songs. It has worked well for as far as branding, but yeah, I didn't come up with Sci F'Irish. That was totally the Lost Druid.
Uh, wow, that's quite a story. All
Yeah.
right, spaceman.
Mark, you talked about, playing D&D, you talked about the Irish music. What were some of your other fandom inspirations for your creativity? We're really curious.
Um, so it was definitely the main ones overall. Definitely was Star Wars. I spent, I had a million Star Wars figures. Star Trek, I feel like shaped me as an individual, as far as whether talking politics or just the idea of an open, society. I love that line in Star Trek 4 when Kirk is talking to the marine biologist, and she says, "What? Let me guess, they don't have money in the future." And he said, "What?" He makes this comment about, what do we need money for? And it struck me, those little moments throughout Star Trek really struck me that we can think outside the box,
Mhm.
and that's one of the things I fell in love with science fiction, and why it shaped me. Now that said, D&D was something that came in the again early '80s, and a friend introduced it to me, but I got obsessed with it. My mom moved to Italy back in '85, and so I went to Rome. I had a snap camera. I spent three rolls of pictures just on the Colosseum. Not one of them were worth a damn, and they were just terrible pictures. But
Ah,
it got into my soul. The idea of this old um, this old time world and such. And that was one of the big things. But that was also what got me into Lord of the Rings, which in the sixth grade, my 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 uh, elementary school teacher showed us The Hobbit, the 1977 Rankin and Bass film, and that got me into Lord of the Rings, which actually led me into Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, those are the main ones. But later on, I got into other things. Doctor Who has become a big part of the songwriting that I do now. I still love things like The Witcher. A lot of it, what I fell in love with was like the media, less reading books and such, and more of the movies and TV shows. There's all sorts of what was it? The Running Man, which I was watching not too long ago. Absolutely loved it. But little things, little movies that changed my life. Back to the Future, even, um, they really just inspired me. Yeah.
I wanna ask you something, and feel free not to, if you don't wanna answer this, just say, let's skip it." But I did want to speak a little bit about you mentioning that you were shunned by the Celtic community, your local Celtic community. Are you able to talk about that at all? Because if you're not, that's fine. We can
Yeah,
move on.
yeah, no, that's fine. So when Andrew and I started playing music, we were the very atypical Irish band. Um, our I play an auto harp, which is an American folk instrument. Andrew played recorder and mandolin. Recorder is Renaissance, mandolin the same, based on the fiddle, and they were not traditional Irish instruments. And the music that we were playing, the way we learned was Irish drinking songs. I had several cassettes that I listened to over and over again to learn all these Irish songs. um, but there was this one guy in Austin who pulled me aside at one point and said, um, "Yeah, let me tell you what Irish music, Celtic music actually is." And I was like, "What? How can I had people give me awkward looks at Irish sessions and such, and it was uncomfortable. And it certainly did not endear me to at least, but I came to understand what the motivation behind it and understanding a lot. But but it was never one of my the things that I appreciated about Celtic music and culture. So when I started the Irish and Celtic Music podcast, which is my flagship podcast, one of the first things I did was to say, I don't define what Celtic music is. You do. Celtic music is ultimately something that you you can make that decision. Now, I might not play you because I might not like that your style of Celtic music, but that's a different story. you know, if you want to call yourself Celtic music, and same thing with me. It's like my music nowadays is it's very rock influenced. The way I play the auto harp has a rhythm and blues feel, so sometimes I call it rhythm and folk. Um, the way I play it, which is unlike any other auto harper out there. uh, it's great, but it's not the traditional style. I just got back from the Irish Fest Atlanta this past weekend singing with my daughter, and yeah, I try to play stylistically what's going to work mostly for the festival. I come to understand, the many of the people in the community. I mentioned one of the songs. I realized afterwards, one of the songs I introduced, it's a song I wrote inspired by Doctor Who. It's called Blink, inspired by the Doctor Who episode of the same name. And I just mentioned that it's inspired by Doctor Who, and like three people got up and left. Because that's not their thing, and I knew this beforehand, but it was a mistake I made, on stage. But I mean, that's everyone is different. Sometimes, a lot of times, again, even in the Irish community, you find a lot of people who are deeply involved at science fiction conventions. There's a great Irish session that shows up at Dragon Con every year because there are so many Irish musicians who love science fiction conventions as well. But there's still a little bit of a stigma depending on who we're talking to.
Mm.
Always with the gatekeepers, right, Janet? Always with the gatekeepers.
Yeah, we've talked about that many times on the show. We don't like gatekeepers.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I started podcasting and started a newsletter, was because the Celtic Music Magazine, was because I realized early on that I could be my own gatekeeper, and that's how it all my a big part of what I do now became a part of my musical career.
Mark, one of the questions we ask folks is, how does their fandom influence their creativity? You've already touched on that a little bit, but could you tell us how the actual things that you love outside of music influences your music?
So when I say I play Sci F'Irish music, and that works great, but I feel like a lot of what I do is actually fits more into the sci-fi drinking songs arena. Um, and that is because songwriting is a funny thing. It's difficult coming up with a topic, something to write about. That's the toughest thing about songwriting, is what are you going to write about? Like anything, I think you have to come up with that first topic, you know? And when so a few years back, I started a podcast with my friend Mikey Mason called In the Verse. And we decided to write one song for each episode of Firefly. And it was a huge success. It was, number one, it gave me a lot of inspiration, be- because I was able to write songs about I had a topic that I could write on, but also it it, it gave me a lot more courage, because while I got started playing music to be a songwriter, I didn't actually spend. There's a lot of time that I was not writing songs. I was just going through the motions of making stuff. So now I'm writing a lot more songs, in part because of this podcast. I sat down and we wrote, the 14 tracks for inspired by the 14 episodes. Then we went on to other media that we love, and so I ended up writing a song inspired by the Rankin and Bass film The Hobbit, started writing songs inspired by Doctor Who. I want to my next show that I do some shows: Firefly drinking songs, Hobbit drinking songs, Irish drinking songs for cat lovers. That's a pet project. But I also my next project is putting together a an album a show of Doctor Who drinking songs because again it's something that I love. I'll write about anything if I can find what's the the specific motivation. I did a song about The Witcher, um, but really it's just a matter of finding the fandoms, finding shows that inspire me enough to write something, or I sit down and make myself write something inspired by some media that I found, and that's really what a lot of it comes down to when it comes to writing songs and the media that I love. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can say safely for both of us that as big fans of Firefly, we approve of of coming up with those with those. Yeah, we loved Firefly and hated that it got canceled after such a short time.
Well, Halfling, I think
Yeah,
that
it's
based on Mark's predilection for doing things, that if we ever need a theme song like the Ballad of Gilligan's Island, he
Ooh,
could write a ballad of the Halfling and the
hey, there you go.
that's a
There you
possibility. That's a very good possibility, right? So, we'll talk. We'll definitely talk about that.
we can talk after the show. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, well, are you able to tell us a little bit about anything you might be working on right now? Any projects or events or anything like that coming up?
Yeah, so I have a bunch of things. Actually, this weekend told you I was playing at Irish Fest, but I actually played with a new band which is called May Will Bloom, and that's my daughter and myself. So that's one of the things that I started working on, and we're going to be at Conjuration this weekend here in Atlanta. But then in a few weeks, I started an event a few years back with my friend Carmen. It is called Nerdy Wonderland, which is it's a imagine a vendor's room for the holidays, uh, but and for nerds, you know. So the idea is to put together to get a bunch of nerdy vendors together and have a market, a holiday market for the nerds and geeks out there who are looking for something different for their holiday season. And so I started that, and that's been just absolute blast to put together, and it's slowly been growing each year. This is year number 3, I think. So that's another project. I also started so I have multiple podcasts. The other one I have is called Pub Songs and Stories, and I have a special feature that I added to it, which is called Quest and Chorus. And the idea there is to fuse my love of sci science fiction and fantasy, travel because I host Celtic Invasion vacations every year, um, but travel, and then of course in each episode I also have a quest of sorts, and the quest is sort of it's where I ask people to guess a secret word they find out in the episode, and then they get some special rewards for it. And I just finished a 6-part series for that, which was a lot of fun because I got to show lots of pictures from my Celtic Invasion vacations. So I did some special recordings this year while I was out there, and I got to share all of that there. So it was just a fun little project to give me something a little bit more to folks. So that was a lot of fun. And yeah, so that's my big thing that I've been working on. I am, also performing at the Georgia Renaissance Festival a few weeks, and got a planning my next Kickstarter. Lots of shows coming up in the future. So,
Wow,
and
busy
hopefully
man.
more songwriting.
Hopefully, yes. I sense that in your future.
Yeah, I've definitely been working on a bunch of some new songs. You know, I did an Outlander song for the first time, which was a little bit more in my musical style, I guess you could say. But yeah.
Well, Mark, you just mentioned that you want to work on more songs. Walk us through your songwriting process.
Okay. It varies a lot. Obviously, but the big things like recently when I'm writing for media in particular, usually way it begins is I I watch we watch an episode of whatever we're watching, like this latest Outlander show. I watched it straight through, occasionally taking a few notes. Um, and then as I go back through it, I go through it a second time and I start writing down phrases and things that I hear in the episode because that just gives a little bit of a starting place for coming up with ideas. And I collect a whole bunch of ideas. Once I have some ideas that some words and phrases, usually an idea starts developing on what the story is. I try to figure out what the theme of the episode is, or at least one of the themes of the episode. And then once I have the theme, I start attempting to create a song, which usually starts with gibberish lyrics and then strum patterns until I come up with something that fuses them together. Um, so if I can get a and then once I have that, I can start developing the lyrics into a full on song. And after a while, if I have once I have the full on song, I usually end up editing a lot because it's I frequently, like for the podcast, the versions that are released on the podcast for in the verse are rarely the versions that are the final ones that I end up recording because quite honestly, I the editing process means a lot. It helps a lot. It helps me to figure out the best way to tell the story, um, and make it even better, more compelling.
Yeah. Well, that sounds an awful lot like most of the writers that we've had on the show are writing, their books. They have similar processes, and they go through their drafts and their editing and revisions and all that, looking for the best wording and phrasing and
Yeah, editing.
pacing, you know.
Yeah, editing was never my strong suit, but over the past few years, I'm really realized the value of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, did you take any music classes, to prepare yourself for getting into this? Or did you just kinda say, "What the heck, I think I'm just gonna pick
Technically
this
speaking, yes.
up."
Technically speaking, I had like a couple years of piano when I was a kid. I played guitar had guitar lessons for like a year or two when I was in high school. Um, but nothing really ever stuck. It really wasn't until I started writing songs, especially for the auto harp. The auto harp was great because it as I started strumming it, I realized there was like a melody that would always form when I was playing it, and so all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, well, there's a note right there's a note there, and there's a note there." So really, I just started picking up the auto, strumming the instrument, strumming the auto harp, and figuring out what I'm going to write about in the process, and that really made a huge difference.
Mark, in addition to writing and performing and doing all this music, you've mentioned that you've got multiple podcasts. Can you tell us about the podcast and their content, and also about where people can find your music and your podcast?
Yeah, so I do host the Irish and Celtic Music podcast. That one is a hour-long radio show of Celtic music. Pub Songs and Stories is that's at well, the first one's at celticmusicpodcast.com. Pub Songs and Stories at pubsong.com is is another one. Firefly Drinking Songs is where the In the Verse podcast is found, but all of them can really be found at keltfather.net, which is the sort of a hub where I can send people to so that they can find out more about everything that I'm creating. And that is the absolute best place to go, keltfather.net.
Okay, great. Great. Well, make sure that we get that into the show notes because I'm sure that people would love
Yeah.
to check out not only the podcast but the music itself. And I'm assuming that you have like CDs available for sale or
Yeah, I have lots
downloadable.
of CDs. Oh, that's it occurred to me that I didn't even mention the album pens. One of the big things I've been working on is, I don't know about you, but I don't really have a CD player. I do stream a
Yeah,
lot of music, but I was trying to find a way to I was trying to find a way to share music uh, differently, and so I came up with the idea of the album pen, which is basically you get what looks like a CD jacket, but a little bit smaller, and you get a lapel pin, and the lapel pin's kind of coolest thing you can wear, but you get a digital download of the album in the process, um, and then you can wear your album. Uh, so it's been one of the best things for my music career the past few years when CD sales started plummeting. You know.
yeah, yeah. Cool. That sounds really awesome. Uh, well, we are about out of time, so we do want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And it has just been a blast talking with you and hearing about everything that you're doing. And it seems like at least from what I see, it seems like you have a lot of fun with everything that you're doing. And I hope that that's true. Um,
Yeah, I do.
uh, and it was really fun to see you and your daughter there, at Multiverse. She
Yeah,
was helping you out there singing some songs, so that was pretty cool.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Uh-huh.
so,
Yeah, we had a lot of
again,
fun.
we do wanna yeah. Well, good. So again, we do want to thank you for taking the time to join us and talk about your creative journey. We had a blast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on. I let me know when this is all out, and I will spread it around. But thank you so much for all you do, and keep supporting all these great authors and artists out there. So I really appreciate that.
Mhm. Well,
And
we appreciate that too,
we
and
do.
we appreciate everybody who comes on the show.
Every single one of them.
Uh,
And we also want to thank our audience tonight for joining us and that you've enjoyed and become inspired and entertained by our guest, Marc Gunn. And this is the Spaceman for the Halfling and the Spaceman podcast. Over and out.